So what we're always trying to figure out is, okay, how do we help Americans, and more specifically conservative and modern Americans who have honest questions about these issues, think differently about immigrants and immigration, so that they don't approach it from a position of fear or a posture of fear. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of awkward conversations. But I feel like if we're ever going to fix the system so that it actually operates with a sense of moral purpose, then we've got to help Americans understand why immigrants and immigration are a net benefit to them and their families.
This is the very awkward, very Cuban time beginning of this episode of Pan Con Podcast.
I'd like to say this is not my fault either.
Everything is your fault.
Nope.
No, you're right. It's actually completely my fault.
Good.
Good. I am Nick Jiménez. I'm joined by Petey the dog and also Chef, 8th grade basketball MVP and proud Ford Bronco owner, Michael Beltrán. We are joined this time around by special guest Ali Noorani, who, unlike many of our guests, has made my job of introducing him very easy because there's a bio on the National Immigration Forum's website that I'll read at least some of.
But I mean, are they going to get like the fact that I was like most improved high school basketball player? And that's not in there. This is like breaking news.
This is good. Yeah. This is good. I mean, have them add this.
I mean, most improved. That means you really suck to begin with.
Everyone starts somewhere.
Right? There you go.
Yeah.
No. Ali Noorani is President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Immigration Forum, a nonpartisan advocacy organization working with faith, law enforcement, and business leaders to promote the value of immigrants and immigration through innovative constituency, communications, advocacy, and advocacy strategies. Ali is one of the nation's most creative coalition builders. I would go on, but I'm going to leave it there and transition to saying that, and I'll let you tell people roughly what the timeline is, but you've also got a book on the way called Crossing Borders that has the detail on the cover that might be most exciting to listeners of this podcast, unless it gets swapped out for somebody else's, a blurb from Jose Andres. I know I'm reading the manuscript. Maybe somebody else shows up and bumps him from the cover. I'm not sure. But as of right now, Jose Andres has his blurb on the cover.
I can step in.
Go for it.
I can take Jose.
This is now. There you go.
Jose, if you need if we need to bump Jose off for some reason, I can do it.
The blurb will be Ali Noorani liked my Negroni. Michael Beltrán.
We've made it. Actually, before we jump in here, somebody made a really good point to me today about you.
Sure. Okay.
That's terrifying. I know. They were actually shocked that you have not taken it upon yourself to create a Mike Beltrán Wikipedia page with all the fake information that you give people.
That's good.
I know, and I'm actually into it.
It'll be there tomorrow morning.
I'm actually super into it. One, because I don't own a Ford Bronco. I own a GMC Jimmy, and I can't go another day with, hey bro, nice Bronco. It's infuriating. I can't do it. And then when you have that whole that conversation that I posted today is so common. It's this one. It's like, hey bro, nice Bronco. It's a Jimmy. Your name's Jimmy? No. The car. It's a GMC Jimmy. Oh. And then they walk away.
Where's the Bronco?
Yeah. No. See?
It's not a Bronco?
Yeah, no. And then it's just more of the back and forth, and they look at you a little like.
But really, the GMC is like a very underrated automobile. There's just not a lot of those on the road anymore.
Oh. The GMC is like, obviously Chevys and GMCs, like I'm an old car guy, so the Chevys and GMCs are the epitome of like great square body cars. They were tanks before they were tanks. Oh man, and they ride incredibly well. They also have the best air conditioning of old trucks ever,
which is what you need in Miami
for sure. Fords, no bueno.
Really?
Yeah, no bueno. Huh. Yeah,
you just is it old enough to have the AC like with the lever?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a rental car right now that has still the hand cranks.
What?
I know.
Who's setting up your rentals?
It's a tough industry. Some supply chain issues.
You have like no power windows. You're like cranking them down.
But I only recently got a car that has power windows, so I feel like I'm returning to my roots here.
Personally, because I have old cars, I prefer them not to have power windows.
Yep.
Because they always go up and down.
Yep.
Old cars sometimes windows don't go up or down.
Exactly.
So
and power locks. How do you feel about that?
I've never had that.
See, I am adjusting to a life with power locks and power windows.
Wow, what was your vehicle before this? I'm intrigued.
It was, so we're off to just a all right.
This is such a Pancon podcast start, you don't even know. Go
Okay,
on.
so when I first got into immigration, because we have to at least give it an anchor, right?
Yeah.
I was in Boston, and I was driving a Mitsubishi Mirage. It was a hand-me-down, let's say late 90s Mitsubishi Mirage from my little sister. This car had been broken into by a bear in Yosemite.
Wait. An actual bear?
An actual bear.
That's... It sounds like... If this isn't in your book, man, you're not writing it right. I'm just saying.
There are many things I'm not doing right, but at some point, like, I was literally holding this car together by duct tape, and I would give staff a ride in the car, and they would just kind of walk up and like, really?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
drove that thing until it died, and then I upgraded to a 2013 Hyundai Accent. That was my most recent car before the power windows experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was a Mirage to an Accent.
Yep. And now it's a Kia Soul, which is a fine ride.
The Soul is the box one with the
Little
little
boxy
little
one.
hamsters. That's
Yeah. Yep.
the commercial with the hamsters.
Yeah.
Wow, we're learning so many things here. All right, so let's go to the beginning.
Okay.
First of all, I can't thank you enough for doing
Hey,
this.
thank you.
I feel like if you would have listened to this podcast before, you probably wouldn't have agreed to come on here. But
But
feel,
here I am.
Yeah, but here you are. Born and raised in California, yeah?
Yeah. So the story is, my parents were both born in Bombay, and then soon after partition, they moved to Pakistan. So they really grew up in Karachi. And in about 1971, my parents, because of the 1965 Immigration Act, were able to immigrate to the United States. And this was just as the India-Pakistan war was hopefully coming to a close. And my dad said, okay, we're going to have better opportunities in the U.S. My dad's older brother was in Livermore, California, who was an engineer. So my parents landed there for about 6 months. They were both trained as physical therapists. So I would say after about 6 to 8 months, they were able to find a place to get their training. And then I came along in 73, and I was born in Santa Cruz, which is a cool little town right on the coast in California. And then we moved to Salinas probably in 1975, 74, 75, because at that point there was only one other physical therapist in Salinas, California. And so my dad ended up in the right place at the right time. And we were very fortunate to grow up, with parents who taught us to, be very, very inclusive, understanding, care about people, and was really fortunate to grow up in a town that was big enough to introduce me to other people, but small enough so I got to know a lot of different people.
How many siblings? You said you have a brother and a sister?
2 younger sisters.
Two younger sisters.
Yeah, so one is she trains teachers in Los Angeles. She's a mother to 2 amazing girls. And my youngest sister is a classical Indian dancer, a Kathak dancer,
Wow.
kind of in the Bay Area. So we're kind of unique for a South Asian family in that none of us are doctors, none of us are engineers, but we're all pursuing our dreams.
Which is, incredibly important. Because
Yeah.
when you pursue your dream, work is, I think, a lot more fruitful and enjoyable.
Yep.
This episode of Pancon Podcast is brought to you by The Barrel. This is the barbecue grill that, if you're watching this in video form, is in front of us. We're here with Chef Danny Boza. Danny, tell us a little bit about what the genesis of this thing was. Where does The Barrel come from?
I was a chef. I was working for a civil engineering firm before that, and I really hated everything that I was doing at the time. So I've always had a passion for cooking. And then, I decided one day to move to New York, and everything took off from New York, Chicago, Hong Kong, LA, Colorado, and then to Hawaii, and then back to Miami. And then I opened up my own spot in Coral Gables, sold the restaurant, and moved on to the next bigger, better thing. Obviously, COVID hit, so we had our own passion project. It started because a friend, was now a business partner, Diego Londoño, approached me to do a menu for his coffee shop. And I said, let's go to Colombia. I got to see the tree. I got to, feel it out, get a little inspiration. So I went out there, and then, I tried some of the food when I got there, and I was blown away by the flavor. I found out they were actually cooking with the actual coffee tree. And then I saw their South American style roaster, and it was just really dinged up, beat up oil drum. Yeah. And I said, you know what? I can make something that's really cool. So myself and Diego put our heads together, and it's a home run in my opinion. It's very sleek, very beautiful to look at. It's very, very cool.
It's a conversation starter. People see that in your yard and they want to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely people see it. And again, we're not trying to take over anybody's yard. We're trying to making a compliment to it. So what you would do on your regular grill for something very quick, you might want to say on a weekend I got more time and I want to chill out and, use the barrel and create some beautiful flavors out of that with our hardwood lump charcoal.
Do you remember what some of the first things you did with it when you were maybe like prototyping it, or you had it close to final form?
Yeah, actually, I'll keep it short. So one of the main things is that our base was simply just the base. It was just a very plain base, and in order to stop all the fat that was dripping and rendering, I would use sand around the side. But of course, even some of the best chefs in the world make some of the greatest mistakes. So I would drop some of the food directly on the sand, and there's no getting sand off food once it hits it. So we had to think of a different system. So now we created these 2 half-moon systems at the base in which you can add liquid and have a grate on top, which pretty much sets this apart from any other, grill, roaster, smoker, which, the 3-in-1 combo is not really commonly found out there.
Very cool. So if people want to learn more, if people want to buy this thing, how do they get more information about the barrel?
I would say go to our Instagram page, at Barrel the BBQ. And, you can go and see our link tree there, which has our YouTube channel, our order page, our information, our specs about the barrel. And it has a bunch of fun videos and very cool things that we've cooked out of it so far.
Very cool. And once you're there, if you use promo code PANCON10, that's PANCON10, PANCON, because I know a lot of people have trouble with this. We don't speak Spanish. We've been called Pumpkin Podcast, the Panko Podcast. This is PANCON10 for $100 off of the barrel. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
This episode of Pancon Podcast is also brought to you by Elite Impact Windows. Elite Impact Windows does exactly what it sounds like they do. They are purveyors of impact windows. That's the kind that, especially if you're in a hurricane-prone sort of area, you want so stuff doesn't come flying through your windows. Mike, you have impact windows on some of your restaurants.
Listen, I heard a rumor. Tell me if this is true. Are all their products tested to go up to 185 mile per hour wind pressures?
That is how their products are tested. That's all their products are tested to meet that. I don't know. I've never been out in 185 mile an hour wind. But if I were, I think I might want to wear some of these windows as like a suit.
I feel safer already just thinking about if I was walking around in that kind of wind and I was wrapped around with their just windows just wrapped around me, I'd feel like a much safer person.
Yeah, you should put them on your caddy.
Maybe not. But I also heard that they meet all the requirements of Miami-Dade County.
They do meet all the requirements of Miami-Dade County.
Fuck me, that's amazing.
EliteImpactGlass.com or on Facebook, Elite Impact Windows, Instagram, Elite Impact Glass. They are proud partners with Eco Windows, CGI, and Windoor.
One of the things I really appreciate about them and their company is that all their products are made locally here in South Florida, and fuck me, that's amazing.
Look at this. They are all made here in South Florida.
Did you do your research?
Man, I did not do the research.
Somebody didn't show up ready.
They have competitive pricing with totally 0% financing available. I mean, I don't know if you have credit like mine, you might not get 0% financing, but it may be an option. It's possible that that's an option for you. 0% financing. I don't know exactly how that works. Whatever the case, if you go on the website, you ask for a quote, and you mention Pancon Podcast, you will get 10% off of your installation.
And I don't know if you guys have ever installed Windows before, but 10% off of window installation, that's a good fucking deal. And you know what? You got it here first on Pancon Podcast.
That's right. Mention Pancon Podcast. Again, it's EliteImpactGlass.com or Elite Impact Windows on Facebook, Elite Impact Glass on Instagram. By the way, you mentioned restaurants. They do commercial properties. So whether it's for your home or your business, if you need Elite Impact Glass to put, all that and do the things that they do so well, you wanna get in on that.
Also, this company, very woke. Very woke. They also offer solar power systems with backup batteries and custom generators for your home. You know why? Because they're woke.
I don't know if that's a positive thing these days to be woke, but but it's nice. I mean,
sounds good.
It sounds good to me that there's solar power involved.
I'm into it.
Generators, solar power, impact glass. If you go to their website, they got a video that shows off like a home that has all of that stuff going on at one time, which is pretty wild. That's pretty wild. A lot of panels, a lot of glass, a lot of things. Pretty soon, we are going to get our hands on at least one pane of impact glass.
I'm ready.
And we're going to try to break it.
I'm ready.
I don't know what the procedure will be, but Mike's breath will have a blast of freshness from that Banaka you just heard. I like this for the podcast, 'cause you can really hear
Banaka
it.
blast at last. Fast blast Banaka.
I just want everybody to know, and apologies to Elite Impact Glass, because this I don't want this to sound like an ad for Banaka, but in the time that we've been sitting here to record this ad, Mike has blasted himself with Banaka like 5 times.
Twice. Get
I
excited
don't
out.
know, man.
Twice.
I don't know.
Come on. Twice.
Elite Impact Glass. Thanks to our sponsor.
Thanks.
Go get your windows from.
Go get those windows. So, I mean, how was the experience growing up in California?
So growing up in Salinas was kind of interesting because, as I tell people, I grew up in a South Asian community that consisted of my parents, my sisters, and myself. Because
Right.
Salinas, California was by and large a city that was either white or Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I very early on, whether or not I realized at the time, got to understand, okay, how to get to know different communities and really kind of get along with people. And I was able to, for better or for worse, shapeshift to a certain degree, right? And those are the kinds of early lessons that you kind of keep with you.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in Salinas, which was in hindsight great. Just like any place where you grow up when you're growing up, you're like, okay, I want to get out. But then I ended up going to school at UC Berkeley and then ended up on the East Coast in Boston for a master's in public health.
That's a switch.
That was...
It's like one side all the way to the other one.
And man, I got to tell you, like the food in Boston is much better than it is back then, now than it is back then. So I moved to Boston in 1998 after growing up in California, and I was just miserable.
Yeah.
Because there's no Mexican food made it as far east as Chicago. In Boston, you'd find great Central American food or Caribbean food, but no Mexican food.
Oh, I find that interesting, the topic about food, especially where you grew up. So you pretty much, like, what were the things that were common for you to eat?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
Because stuff that's like,
yeah,
maybe the stuff that your grandparents or your parents are used to eating, and then did they cook that at home, and then when you guys would go out, you would eat something different?
Yeah. So, both of my parents were working, right? My dad was standing up, running the practice. My mom was kind of handling the business side of it. But every night, I remember my mom making dinner, and half a week, or if not more, she would make something from Pakistan or India. So we grew up.
Cool.
I grew up cutting onions and frying onions and kind of beginning to understand kind of how to make Indian food or Pakistani food. But then when we'd go out, you'd go out to Mexican food. You'd go out to whatever was good at the time. And what I really appreciated with my parents is that they encouraged us always to try new things. They've always forced us to eat everything, including like the one vegetable that I can no longer eat,
Which is?
raw zucchini.
Oh, yeah?
Like raw zucchini. I have never met anybody who likes raw zucchini.
I like raw zucchini.
You are the only person in my life.
I don't know. I feel like it's just such a neutral thing. As long as it's like fresh and like good, it's got snap to it. I mean, we have a raw zucchini salad that's accompanied with the chicken right now.
You were out of chicken tonight, but no complaints.
Yeah.
But really, we would eat my sisters and I would eat everything on the table, and my parents knew that we did not like raw zucchini, and every night they'd serve us raw zucchini.
Oh, man,
it was
what a
brutal.
push.
It was terrible.
What's like if you were to say like a childhood memory when it comes to food of something that you really enjoyed in your home and something that you enjoyed like outside your home?
So I think kind of like the staple dish that whenever I always think of home as a yogurt curry.
Oh.
And it's just a really, really simple dish of, graham flour, yogurt, turmeric, curry leaves, mustard seeds, and cumin. And I would say over the last few years, my mom has taught me how to make it. I'm kind of working on my mix.
That's cool.
But that's the dish that always takes me back home and eating at home. I would say the meal that I always remember, there are two meals that take me back to Salinas. One is this Mexican place called Rosita's, I think it was called, right in downtown Salinas, just like an old-time Mexican place. And actually one time I had a chance to interview Joe Madden, the old Cubs manager, and apparently he had played minor league baseball in Salinas. So I opened up this interview and said, "Hey Joe, you and I have something very similar in common, because apparently he had played catcher for the Salinas Spurs. And I said, Joe, you and I both played catcher in Salinas, California. And he looked at me, kind of gave me the side-eye look, seeing if I'm an athletic build. Clearly I'm not. And I said, but my career ended at Little League.
Right.
But we both talked about that Mexican restaurant. And the other thing in Salinas that I'll always talk about is that Salinas has the best bagels in the country.
Whoa, that's a strong statement.
It's a strong statement.
Man, that's a strong statement.
Strong statement. But the Bagel Bakery, they boil their bagels. It's just a fantastic bagel.
I love the conversation of food and what connects you to a certain place and a certain time, and like how easily it could take you back to that place and that time, especially like younger when you're growing up. So then you moved to Boston. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
So I'll give you a food story in Boston that I don't know if I ever shared publicly. So I just moved to Boston, obviously growing up in California, and I go to a sub spot, right? And I walk in and
all kinds of subs or just cold cuts or what?
I can't even remember. I can't even remember. Right, but I just remember the guy behind the counter. He looked like me, South Asian guy, kind of like straight black hair, and he starts speaking with a Caribbean accent, and it blew my mind.
Interesting,
because I never heard anybody speak with a Trinidadian accent.
Oh, right.
Who looked South Asian.
Right.
And I was like, okay. And it's freezing outside. And it was kind of like the mind-bending experience for me in Boston of, okay, I'm not in California. This is a completely different level of diversity. So it was kind of fun.
So how long were you in Boston for?
So I was in Boston for 10 years. And what I did is the Master's in Public Health program. And then I worked for the city of Boston doing environmental work and for 2 big health centers in the Dorchester neighborhood, where I got to kind of know the Vietnamese community, the Haitian community, the Irish community in Boston. And then I got into immigration in 2003, and that's when I ran the statewide Immigrant Rights Coalition in Massachusetts. And that's really been kind of my career trajectory since then, is kind of working on immigration issues.
So the I guess 2003 was like a turning point. You found like that thing that you really wanted to like hone in on and kind of focus on, because now it's been what, 2003, it's been 19
almost 20
years.
Yeah, tell me about it. I think, and it's interesting because kind of going into it, I knew that I didn't wake up one day saying I wanted to work on immigration. And it goes back to something that I saw at the health centers, where it was a Saturday afternoon, and there was this Vietnamese community, and we were working with Vietnamese youth in Dorchester. And we did this Saturday afternoon session where where we connected some of the youth with lawyers. And what I realized in that conversation is that these Vietnamese teenagers who had kind of done some stupid teenager thing, got in a fight or whatever, right? And their public defender told them to plead guilty. But because they were refugees whose families came over really as boat people, they were deportable. And what I realized is that, these kids are just trying to make it in the U.S., deal with life. And it was our immigration system that was so fucked up that it was going to turn around and deport them because of a honest teenage mistake that so many of us make. And that stuck with me when I just realized that, okay, there's something fundamentally wrong with this system. And it was kind of under my, in the background, if you will. And when I was fortunate enough to get the job to run the Immigrant Rights Coalition, I just realized that, immigration policy is one of those issues that it touches people's lives in nearly a real-time fashion. Right? Because if immigration policy changes tomorrow morning, by tomorrow afternoon, somebody's life is completely different. And I just feel every single day kind of dumb lucky to work on this issue.
Right. I mean, it's been 20 years. How old were you when that started in 2003?
Man, so I was probably 31 because I moved to DC and moved into the national level at 35.
Yeah, so you were in Boston for another 4 years.
Yep.
And then you moved to DC.
Yep.
I find it really interesting because as someone that comes from a culture that obviously fled a country,
right?
And then my parents and my grandparents came like way before I was born, and then I was fortunate enough to be born here. Perspective is super interesting, right? Like, I don't really know if they'll let me know when they're ready for another one. I don't really know like the focus on immigration for me is more about like what my people went through and like what they're going through now, but it really was never like the policy of immigration. And then, you know, I've listened to some of your stuff since obviously I wanted to be somewhat prepared, which Nick never says. He says that I never prepare, which I did prepare.
What?
Yeah, whatever.
No, hold on. There is something I want to say about this.
Okay.
So, and I'm sorry, Mike wasn't here when this was explained. The reason why I've abandoned my post is that Alan over here is a Belen graduate, so
I'm sorry.
the producer is absent for this entire episode.
Cool.
But
thanks for coming.
before
Showing up late and, you know, setting up late,
Yeah.
but, you know, you came.
Well, while I was setting up, I was over here setting up microphones, and 8th grade basketball MVP Michael Beltrán emerged from the other side of this wall and told me that he had been listening to a podcast of yours. This has never happened. Michael has never so much as like checked somebody's Instagram before an interview. So I'm torn between these two experiences of like a podcast Mike prepared for and jibber jabbering with Alan back here.
But it is being recorded, though.
It is. So
okay,
I'll
that's good.
I'll
So
get
you
to
can-
it.
you can
Yeah,
listen
I'll
to
get
it
to
later.
it.
You
Yeah.
can check back.
Yeah.
You can check back. It's fine. It's
All right,
fine.
that's it for me.
Well, I mean, just in listening to some of the things that I heard earlier and the other day, it's like the way that immigration is looked at is almost like I feel like I don't know totally where to put my emotions towards it, right? Because it's almost like each administration is looking at it from a different angle, and the angle is always to benefit what they're trying to prove.
Yep.
And I think that that's very sad, right? Like, and as someone that's in it much more, you know, than any of us are really, it just feels like it's so like hollow, you know, because like I think that the subject is much deeper. I mean, people are trying to provide opportunities for families. They're trying to flee anything, so many things. And over here we have politics and administrations looking at it as more of opportunity driven than like purpose driven, you know?
That's a great way to put it.
And for someone that's, I mean, been doing it for 20 plus years, and I'm, you know, it's got to be a very personal experience for you. It's interesting the way that I heard you speak about it, because, you know, you look at it from a very like factual, intellectual standpoint. But I mean, I have a hard time like 86ing emotions. Like taking the emotions out of the equation for me would be very difficult, because coming from the background that my family comes from, it's like incredibly emotional. You know, like we fled so many things, you know, religious persecution, political persecution, just like the whole thing across the board. And on the other hand, you have administrations looking at it like, well, this is going to benefit what we talked about at this one time, so this will work.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm always really clear about is that I am not an immigrant. And as an advocate, that makes my job really, really easy.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with a lot of folks in the advocacy community who they themselves are immigrants, who are undocumented immigrants, whose families are undocumented.
Right.
So I always really try to understand the courage that they have to hold on to be able to kind of engage in this conversation, because it's so deeply personal.
Right.
And I imagine it's very similar for yourself, because of the community that you grew up in, and just the ongoing conversation about Cuba and what is happening, right? But for me, I for better or for worse, I create this emotional distance, which I just have to be honest about, right? But I think you put it really well and really importantly in that it's not about opportunity, it's about purpose. And what is the purpose of our immigration policy and the folks who are implementing our immigration policy? And right now, I would argue that the purpose of our immigration system, by and large, is to keep people out as opposed to welcome people in.
Right.
And that trickles down all the way from the federal level to the state level to the local level, unless, quite frankly, a city or a state says, okay, well, we're going to intentionally do something very different. So what we're always trying to figure out is, okay, how do we help Americans, and more specifically, conservative and modern Americans who have honest questions about these issues, think differently about immigrants and immigration, so that they don't approach it from a position of fear or a posture of fear. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of awkward conversations. But I feel like if we're ever going to fix the system so that it actually operates with a sense of moral purpose, then we've got to help Americans understand why immigrants and immigration are a net benefit to them and their families. And that's a lot of what we do at the National Immigration Forum. And that is really, honestly, what I think that ultimately is going to get this issue into a much better place.
Well, I found it incredibly fascinating because, like, I think media is a very interesting thing in general, right? I mean, there's so many different forms of media. Some weird people would say that what we're doing is media right now. I don't totally agree, but, like, media says one thing. So then I was just listening to some of the things that you were saying earlier, and it's basically the opposite of what everyone else is saying, right? Which is that we need to grow as a country, right? To keep the country moving, we need to grow at a certain pace. And it's incredible, the factual information that I heard that I had never heard before. I had absolutely never heard before. Talking about, like, age demographics, the average age of people in the country. And I was like, man, that's true. The average age of a human is 58, right? In the United States. I was like, that's fascinating to me. And then the fact that, like, the workforce is going to be at a certain place, and then also talking about the Biden administration, what they want to say, and then what the actual thing that is happening. I just found it very fascinating because those are all facts that I think that for the day-to-day person, and I don't think it's for anyone's fault. I think it's because people live in that day-to-day grind, you know, as we're all very aware. Like, we're just trying to, survive is a bad word, but just trying to get through and do our thing. Right. Like, facts like that need to be spoken to the world.
But so there's a paper that we wrote about a year ago. It's called Room to Grow. And I got to give a lot of credit to my colleague, Danilo Zak, who did the heavy lift on this. But the calculation that we made is that in order for us to maintain the current ratio of retirement, of adults or retirement age to working age adults, and that current ratio is about 3.5 for working age adults to retirees, we've got to increase legal immigration by 37%, which is only 370,000 people. In a country of, 350 million people? That's not a lot of folks.
Right.
And what we've seen over the years between COVID and the previous administration is that number of immigrants coming to the U.S. really dropping pretty precipitously. So we're on a trajectory that we as a country are going to be struggling to find the workers in order to maintain our retirement system, sustain our retirement system, which is all fine and dandy and in terms of kind of a big picture data set that we can talk about. But what does that mean actually to a person and their lives? So the way we've been thinking about this is that if you are 55 years old and you want to retire in 10 years or 12 years, you've got to think ahead, right? Either you are saving enough money through your 401k that you can retire on your own, you don't have to worry about where Social Security is going to be. Or you've got to figure out and come to terms with the idea that Social Security is not going to be solvent unless we have enough working age adults.
Right.
So I feel like what we've got to do is a much better job of bringing that big message down to somebody's personal life. And please remember, that person may or may not want immigrants in their community, in their town, in their city for a variety of reasons. So we've got to speak to their self-interest. And that's where a lot of the tension comes up in all of this.
Well, and again, just because, like, me, the kind of human being that I am, and, like, everything for me is, like, very viscerally emotional. Like, my food and my job and all those things, like, I'm a hopeless romantic about all of it. And something that I admire is when someone could just give, like, actual fact and remove the emotion from it. And I think that, like, what we deal with from an immigration standpoint a lot is because, and like I was telling you before we started recording, was, you know, I lived in Virginia for 4.5 years. And, you know, I mean, it's very different. It was very different. People's perception on everyone else was very different. So talking about, like, telling those kinds of people that you actually need a larger workforce, so maybe immigration is a good idea for you for your future, I could only imagine what that conversation would be like, you know, because I've had conversations with those kind of people, and I'm like, I don't know if you're totally going to get anything, let alone the fact that this is a much deeper subject than just the fact that you don't like people, you know, like your livelihood long term, I guess. really is dependent on creating a stronger workforce. And if you create that through immigration, it's kind of like what you're talking about.
So a lot of this, I think, comes to speaking to somebody's values framework. So, look at the restaurant industry. When you look at their national data, it will say up to nationally 10% of the restaurant workforces, immigrants are undocumented. In larger urban areas, some estimates are up to 40%.
I would agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's an economic argument that I'm making, which will make sense to a certain kind of slice of the American public. But a lot of other folks who are going to look at this and say, okay, well, you as a restaurant owner are looking for somebody to, you're going to pay them less money. That's going to, or a business owner, that's going to be their assumption. So then what we're trying to say is that, okay, in addition to the economic benefit, are you a person of faith?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so what does your faith ask you to think about welcoming the stranger? So a lot of what we learned about in terms of engaging conservative American is to try to create a conversation so that they have an opportunity to not just learn about the issue, because it's much more than learning about the issue, but it's actually discussing the issue and having a dialogue about the issue in the context of their church or their synagogue or their mosque or their temple. Because that's where we have found those are the spaces where you can start to really take some of the anxiety out of these questions. You may not get all the anxiety out, but it's hard to, if you're a person of faith, it is hard to argue with what the Bible is telling you, if you're a Christian. And I mean, look, I'm not saying this because, I am a person of faith, but I'm very clear about that. But I am saying this because I have deep respect for people of faith, and I really work hard to try to understand what is important to them and how to create conversations and spaces that are important to them in their communities.
I think that faith is obviously like a good, because there's a lot of commonality through all different types of culture to understand what faith means, right? Because faith means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? I think all in essence are kind of like along the same line, but they just could have different names, right?
Right.
So, but I also think that there's like a moral ethics involved here that it's. And again, going back to like those 4.5 years that I lived in a place that I never thought, after I spent 4 years there, I was like, it was a very eye-opening experience for me because, the things that I heard, the things that I saw were things that I never thought that I would hear and never think that I would see, right? Because I'm from a city that's like a melting pot of everything.
Yeah, Miami is it's different from any place in the U.S.
It's just like you can meet a person from anywhere, any day of the week, right? And it's just like every other day, and you don't think about it. And then when you go to certain parts of the United States, it's definitely not like that, And I think just growing up in that environment that everything was like very all-inclusive changed my perception just overall. Because for me, people are people and humans are humans. It doesn't really matter where you come from, And it's not like that everywhere. So the idea, for, like just the conversation of immigration for me has always been an emotional, pull, right? And again, listening to some of the things that I've heard you talk about, it's just very factual, And I think because I always lean towards I want people to have understand what I'm talking about, the moral basis of this, right? Yep. But then when you talk about the moral basis of something and then you give them factual information behind it, it's so how do you refute that?
I mean, that's the thing. It's this is what I love about the work that we do, is that we really try to combine the facts with the values. And I've said this for a long time, is that, immigration for the majority of Americans is not about politics or policy. It's ultimately about culture and values and how the country and their respective communities are changing. So how do we help people understand those changes so that they don't see them as a threat, they see them as an opportunity? And, if we can figure that out at a very local level, much less at a national level, then we get closer and closer to actually, having the country that I'd like to believe that we all want to live in.
What is the country you think we all liked?
Yeah, when I said that, I was like, damn, I left myself open here.
Yeah, that was why.
Yeah.
I think for me, I would say that the country I would like to live in is just a place that people are people, there are no lines, it's just like, I don't know. When I look at people, I don't see anything but just another human being, right? And like everyone along their path is living a different day, and they're living a different journey. It doesn't matter where you come from, right? And you have an opportunity to learn something from everyone. And this is why I love food so much.
Yeah.
Growing up, I didn't have a ton of money. My parents worked very hard. We went through tough times, whatever. How I really learned about food was through different cultures and understanding and going to eat and eating their food and reading about their food. You learn so much about culture, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is. There's a huge, there's a lot of romance there, because you could learn so much about why they do what they do and why they love what they love. And it's incredible to me.
Yeah.
That to me is really the country that I want to live in. It's like those things, like we are crossing lines to understand things about different people and where they come from. And there's so much history there that it just gives you so much more, I don't know, like a mental bandwidth to like be able to do things that maybe you thought you couldn't do.
So I think food and the production of food is one of the ways that a lot of folks in rural parts of the country are seeing the value of immigrants and immigration. So I've got this book coming out in March called Crossing Borders, The Reconciliation of a Nation of Immigrants. And one of my final chapters focuses in on the story of Twin Falls, Idaho. Twin Falls is a small city of about 50,000 people, which in 2015 was the kind of epicenter of some really, really virulent anti-immigrant, anti-refugee rhetoric that was brought on by Trump. It was brought on by Alex Jones and Infowars and Breitbart. It was
all puppeteers, puppets, and clowns.
It was badness, terrible. It was just terrible. But it was really interesting as I have gotten to know Twin Falls and the community there, because you have a thriving refugee resettlement effort led by Zeze. I'm blanking on his last name. I'm sorry, but he himself was a refugee from Rwanda. So he came into this job with an incredible experience as a refugee himself. But then he ended up working with the city leadership, and then of all people, the dairymen of Idaho. So the dairymen in Twin Falls, Idaho, which is southern Idaho, they have a disproportionate impact, not just on the economy. I mean, there are more cows in Idaho than people, right?
Is there really?
Yeah,
That's fact?
That is a fact. That's
incredible.
It vacillates. So California, it's usually like Wisconsin or New York or California are top 2 or 3, and Idaho is always kind of top 3 in terms of milk dairy production. It's wild. So, and the dairymen of Idaho, they're not like shrinking liberals, right? They are like true red conservatives, but they, based on their stories as dairymen whose families immigrated to the U.S. from Denmark because they were pushed out by World War II, they saw what was happening to Latino immigrants in the early 2000s because of the Bush administration's enforcement actions, and then what Trump was doing in the last administration. They said, you know what, we've got to step up. So now in southern Idaho, in Twin Falls, you have the Idaho Dairymen's Association partnering with Chobani, partnering with cheese producers, partnering with law enforcement and faith leaders, saying, you know what, we as a conservative community are going to welcome immigrants and refugees to Twin Falls. And they have, up to this point, successfully pushed out the Breitbarts and the Infowars elements. It's always a battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it all came down to kind of that shared culture of being on a dairy farm, milking the cows twice a day, and that dairy farmer whose grandparents immigrated from Denmark standing shoulder to shoulder with the Mexican immigrant to make sure those cows are milked, to understand, okay, what is the commonality? And I mean, you're right. It's kind of food at the end of the day was the common thread there.
Yeah.
And there are those kinds of stories across the country. So to answer your question, kind of what's the America that I think that I believe in? It's all those tensions and all those complexities boil down to people working shoulder to shoulder to get through something and saying, you know what, I'm going to support you.
I think the way, and like the analogy that I always see in my head when I talk about like the country that I pine to live in is one that we all sit at the same table and we all break bread together.
Yep.
Right? Obviously, to use like my industry as an example, like the depth of food and what it does for like touching a human being's soul, can go so much further than like the visceral, like everyday media, just like push of trash that we see daily, right?
Yep.
And that's why I think food is like the ultimate community. Like it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. Like, I mean, you grew up eating Mexican food, right? And how incredible is that?
Right.
And it's something that's part of your story as a human being, and I find that beautiful.
I guess I would take it one step further, is that it's not only the food that you and your staff cook every night, and I mean, it was a freaking incredible meal tonight. Thank you. But it's also how you, as the leader of your restaurant, are treating your staff, who are developing your staff, and ensuring that they're the leaders in the industry of tomorrow.
Yeah.
So in DC, next time you're in DC, we'll go to this restaurant. It's called Muchas Gracias. It's owned by a friend of mine, Christian Irabian. And it's a fantastic restaurant. Started as a pop-up during COVID, right? And now it's just a booming enterprise. But even better is that he started an effort kind of as a side hustle, which is now kind of becoming his full-time gig, called Hospitality Humans, where he is really intentionally putting together programs to help restaurateurs support their immigrant staff. So for him, he owns it, right? So he said, okay, I hired Luis and a coworker there who started as, I think, a line cook and a dishwasher, and now they, in essence, are managing his restaurant. But from his perspective, it's more than the food that we eat at his restaurant. It's about changing the industry.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's the opportunity that the food industry has when it comes down to this really, really controversial issue. It's not just who's serving your food, but who is leading in the production of your food, and that you see kind of on the other side of the counter saying, you know what, I'm making what you enjoy tonight is what I made.
What I love about something that has like enamored me and like attached me to this industry that I'm in for the entirety of it is like the personalities involved.
Yeah.
And all the walks of life. Like tonight, your meal was cooked by somebody from the Bahamas, someone from Argentina, someone from Venezuela, someone from Mexico, and me.
Yeah.
And that was the entire staff today.
Yeah.
And that to me is a beautiful thing.
Yep.
Because that is one team working for one goal, and it doesn't matter where they're from, who they are. It's like, to me, that's incredible.
And this takes place not just in amazing big city Miami. This takes place all across the freaking country.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And I find that like it's just, to me, it's one of the very special parts of like the industry that I'm in, is that you can give somebody an opportunity that maybe came from a tough background, an immigrant, somebody who struggled to get papers and that has papers and whatever it may be in their whole situation, and now they have the opportunity to grow within a system, as long as it's a nurturing, proper system,
Right.
of someone that wants to guide them along the way. And that's really something that I find beautiful about like the food industry. And like, to kind of go back to something we were talking about before, talking about how like the workforce has been shortened.
Yep.
Right. Something I find interesting, if we continue to shorten it for much longer, the long-term ramifications of kind of like my industry and so many industries like mine, in 20 years, they're going to suffer super hard.
Yep.
Right. Because there's not going to be those people that have been training under people for a long time, because they came from all walks of life. They could be immigrants from anywhere around the world, and we're not giving them that opportunity now.
Yep.
So in 20 years from now, it's going to be worse than it is now if we continue down this path. You know, and I'm faced with this subject every day. Like people documented, undocumented, from a certain place, don't speak a language, doesn't matter. Like for me, work ethic is always everything. And the want to be better is always everything. But if we continue to go down this path, my industry and so many like mine, I feel like it's going to be very, very tough in 20 years.
A lot of times in the DC policy debate, there's a lot of conversation about kind of we need high-skilled immigrants, engineers, doctors, etc. I'm like, you know what? We need the skilled engineer, we need the skilled cook, we need the skilled farm worker, and they all have high skills. And so we really try to I try really hard not to use high skill versus low skill.
And I think that that's great because, like something I was going to say was, why does immigration have to benefit you?
Yeah.
Why can't it just benefit like what's right and what's wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that I find that fascinating and something that I really appreciate about just you being here and then listening to some of your work and being able to talk to you is just like, this isn't an issue of what should benefit you. It's an issue of like what's right and wrong. If it ends up benefiting you, then great.
Right. And I mean, I agree with you, but I think the fact of the matter is that, again, kind of going back to the research that I did, and, another town that I wrote about was Storm Lake, Iowa. And you look at the history of Storm Lake, Iowa and kind of rural Iowa, and it was kind of, the core of Iowa and so much of rural America was just hollowed out because of the debt crisis of the 1980s and kind of the globalization. And so what has happened over time is that a lot of Americans have come to fear the Mexican in Mexico as much as the Mexican next door. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, I do think we need to find the balance between making the case that immigrants and immigration are a net benefit to you as well as the right thing to do. And that's why it's that we really try to kind of toe that line between finding the economic fact-based case as well as that values-based reason of, okay, this is the right thing to do. And I've always found that if you just do one or the other, then people will often say, well, okay, yes, it may be the right thing to do, but I know so-and-so who lost their job because of immigration, right? And so it's such a complicated issue, so there's no one answer. Mm-hmm. There's always a lot of ways to say no to it, right? But there are not many ways to say yes if you've got a lot of questions.
When people say that, is it always financial based? Like someone lost their job because someone was willing to make less for that same job?
So I think people oftentimes kind of conflate the question of whether or not an immigrant is taking a job for less wage, mm-hmm. or an immigrant is coming to the U.S. to take a public service that, quote, my tax dollars paying for. So it's always a combination of kind of jobs and programs that people feel like are being taken. So a lot of times I think people are led to believe that it's a zero-sum game, and they're not realizing what employers are paying. Going back to that dairyman example, I mean, they're paying well above kind of minimum wage in Idaho, and it's because that's what the market demands. Right. And I imagine that's the case here in your industry.
Sorry. Oh no, fly away Sharpie. Yeah, I mean, our industry has changed a lot. I think our industry is in as a business owner, and also as like a chef that lived the day to day, and I was a line cook and a fry cook, and I did all the things in the kitchen. Like the industry is in a much better place than it was 5 years ago, and I say that from the standpoint of the employee, and maybe not the standpoint of the employer. But I'm okay because I've lived both, and I think like the true mission of our company completely is to be competitive, like wage-wise from top to bottom, and usually like when you're competitive wage-wise from top to bottom, the people that suffer the most are the ones at the top, right? Because the people at the bottom are making more money. Yep. And to me, that's totally cool because the team is what matters. That's the only way that we're successful. Yep. I feel like this is going to be good for us long term. What I worry about is, and honestly, I didn't think about it as much as I'm thinking about it right now this second until I heard you speak on it, which is we're losing a certain amount of workforce, and if we continue to lose that, what does that mean for us long term? I mean, it means that we're going to lose a large portion of our workforce for a long time. Yeah. And we're never going to gain it back.
Because, I mean, I just have to imagine that you are providing an incredible amount of knowledge and expertise to the staff that are working next to you. I mean, I'm sure they're teaching. I hope so. But you're probably also learning from them, too.
100%.
Right? So there is this, I mean, you're investing in them, they're investing in you. Yeah. And that, you want to make good on that investment.
Right. I think that a big thing that I've always talked about, like in kitchens specifically, and I think overall in like the food and beverage world, is it's creativity through collaboration, and it's like a lot of like we need to learn from each other so we can best fit everyone's strengths and avoid everyone's weaknesses, so that way we can put out the best product for our guests.
So tell me a little, if you don't mind, the conversation that you were having with the woman from the kitchen before we've clicked on, because I felt like that was one of those conversations. And where was she from?
She's a Brit, and she's incredible. She's our number 2 here in this restaurant, and it's funny because the number 1 is Mexican, the number 2 is a Brit, and the number 3 is, he'll be mad if I don't remember. He's Hispanic somehow. he's a Hispanic, and he's been here for like 5 years. That's why he'd be mad that I forgot.
Yeah.
And it's, like, together we talk about food, we put food together, and we work through issues. Does it need to be stronger here? What was lacking? And it's like, it is a conversation that, like, I lean on them as much as they lean on me.
That's what I picked up in that
Right.
45-second conversation overhead. Yeah.
Right, and it was like, for instance, that dish is a little bit of a, it's a little annoying because I feel like it's so strong, but it's just not where it needs to be. So I think all 3 of us are pretty annoyed right now because we haven't figured out like where it's lacking, but it's going to take all 3 of us to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's really what I find incredibly special about really good kitchens is I think that everyone that's very good checks their ego at the door, and they all collectively work together. And what I find incredible about that is that it doesn't matter where you're from.
Yeah.
This is the focus. The focus is what's on the plate, and it could be from wherever because our food is kind of weird. It's based in French technique, but there's Spanish influence, there's Cuban influence, there's Mexican, there's all kinds of influence from everywhere. Mm-hmm. Really Miami is the landscape, and we use our produce and blah blah that pretty much what we talk about every day. But I find that like really, really special because Ashley's a good example. Like, she was the last addition to the team, and she came out of left field, out of nowhere, and she was a beast, and she just moved from North Carolina, and she's got a heavy accent. She's a little brash because she's from where she's from, and
The Brits. Yeah.
right. But she got along with the team swimmingly, and it's just awesome. Like, and I think that's really why I love to cook very interesting food and very good food, and I love to run a very interesting and good restaurant. But really, it's the people that make it incredibly special.
Yeah.
And the people are from everywhere. They're literally from everywhere.
So what's the question that you when you're sitting down with somebody for the first time and you get a sense, okay, this is somebody I want to work with, what are your first couple of questions you ask them?
It really depends on the person.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I could ask something like ridiculous as like, what do you watch on TV? Mm-hmm. To like, did you read comic books as a kid? Did you ever draw? Were you part of a sports team? If you were part of a sports team, what position did you play? Why did you play that sport? Because all sports are different, right?
Right.
But sports say a lot about how you can work on a team. Like, if you were a tennis player, right, and you only did singles, then you're probably not a team player.
Yeah.
Right? If you're a golfer, probably not a team player either.
I'm a terrible golfer.
I'm a terrible golfer either. You put me at Topgolf with a couple drinks, I'm having a good time, but I'm not really like a
You're
good
the best
golfer.
golfer ever.
right. The screen may not say that, but I'll think that. Yeah, I mean, it all really depends on the person. Yeah. Like, so what do you like about food? Why do you like that about food? What chefs do you follow? We're super old school, like, in our approach. So if I'm sitting with someone and they have an opportunity to kind of be on the management side, if they don't really follow or understand old school chef ideology, like the French Brigade system and like those chefs that, the Marco Pierre Whites of the world, the Alain Ducasses of the world, Karems, like the very old school stuff, they probably aren't going to fit here. They could fit somewhere else within the company, but maybe not this one specifically. So, it's always different with everyone. And I'm a little strange in my approach with like new employees too, because like if it's like a management position, I'll ask them to meet me at like a random coffee shop that I know it's going to be very like busy and very loud, and I want to see if it makes them uncomfortable. I want to see how they react in that situation. I want to see,
Yeah. And do you feel like you're asking the same questions across cultures and kind of where people are from?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
because ultimately this is your team.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter like where they're from. Yeah. I always talk about food and like what they enjoy to eat and what they enjoy to cook, because I find that exciting. So I'd like to know.
Yeah.
But it's really it is the same across the board. I never, and it goes from like where they're from, gender, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, like that stuff to me is like, do you love this or don't you?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it doesn't matter where you're from, you're not going to make it. You know,
You're not going to enjoy this.
it's just not going to be like the place that you want to be.
Yeah.
You know, so, but man, I find it so fascinating. So, okay. So now you're a book in March. That's exciting. You're excited. You don't look excited right now.
I don't know.
You don't look very excited.
It's weird. It's like, so this is my second book. The first book, I was absolutely miserable after. I loved writing it. I loved writing the second one. I mean, I love kind of like sitting in my, kind of at my desk and just kind of in my own little head and kind of cranking words onto the paper. But it's hard for me to talk about because ultimately it's your own work, right?
Right.
But I mean, so with this book, what I did is I tried to think about, what does the global migration debate mean to policy? So I looked at the Syrian refugee crisis, how that was weaponized by Viktor Orban in Hungary, how that led to Brexit, how that in many ways led to Trump, and then how Trump weaponized migration from Central America to really harden our immigration system. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, okay, what do we need to do as a country to find some sort of reconciliation? And the point that I try to make in the book is that reconciliation is not going to begin in Washington, D.C. It's not going to begin with the United States Congress. Dysfunction is just too high. It's going to begin in places like Twin Falls. It's going to begin in places like Storm Lake, Iowa. It's going to begin because evangelical women are saying, you know what? The way that we as a country are treating immigrants is wrong. So how can I think about this differently? And it was ultimately, I hope to not just paint a picture of everything that's wrong with the system, but begin to paint a picture of, okay, what can we do to change it?
I mean, it seems more like what you're talking about it seems like more of a grassroots effort to the change of a mindset.
Correct.
As opposed to change of policy.
Right. Because like I said, it's not about policy and politics. It's about culture and values. And the way that culture and values are debated and negotiated and talked about, in a fundamental way is locally. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's all the noise at the national level, and that, of course, informs the debate, but it's always going to come down to whether or not you and I can sit down and say, okay, we agree to agree on A, but we're going to agree to disagree on B, and we're going to be okay about that.
I find like the agree to disagree part is one of the most difficult. Would you like another?
Sure, why not?
Two more? Yeah. Yeah. You guys want another? Yeah, 4 more. Yeah, 4 more. I think where we suffer is the agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with people disagreeing with me.
Yeah.
It's totally fine as long as I feel confident in where I'm at, because that's like, I won't say it's what makes me happy, but I feel like that's the conclusion that I've come to. And hopefully at this age, I feel like I can come to a conclusion. Okay. And your conclusion can change.
Exactly. You're not allowed to change in these days.
Your conclusion can change.
Yeah.
And it's okay to accept being wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, I learned that a lot in, so we opened when I was 29, turning 30.
Really?
Yeah. So
how old are you now?
36. And like it was a hard learning time for me because I had never learned to be so very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that when you accept failure or you accept a conclusion that may be wrong and you say that out loud, you make yourself very vulnerable.
Yep.
But how strong can you stand behind saying, I'm okay with being wrong? I'm okay that I may have fucked this up and it's time to move on from that. And then you learn from it.
But see, in that process, oftentimes these days in particular, when somebody wants to change their mind, I feel like the rest of us will pile on and shame them for changing their mind, right?
Yeah.
And then people are like, "Oh, fuck that! I'm not going to tell you I'm changing my mind. I'm just going to retrench and I'm going to dig in." So it's when it comes to immigration, we often try to think about, okay, how do you create the spaces? So there's a kind of a body of literature that says there's an in-group of people and there's an out-group of people. So your in-group are folks who think like you, often look like you, and believe what you do. Mm-hmm. And the out-group are the folks who are the diametric opposite.
Right.
So these groups are set up so that one is against the other. And what we've tried to think about is, okay, how do we establish in-groups that are very similar to the in-groups you're leaving? I'll give you a precise example, right? So that first in-group is Republican, it's conservative, it is anti-immigrant. Right? Okay. So then let's create another in-group that is Republican and conservative, but pro-immigrant. And it's interesting because if you can create that second in-group, you're giving people a place to go without asking them to change their political or their religious identity.
Sure.
And oftentimes what I find from my liberal friends is that, okay, if somebody is, Republican, conservative, and anti-immigrant, and they're become pro-immigrant, that means that they are Democrat, liberal, and pro-immigrant. No.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot assume that somebody's going to change their political identification in this day and age. It's too far a bridge. May or may not change down the road, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to provide people a different way to think about immigration. Thank you.
You're the best.
And
Cocktail angel. Cheers again.
Yeah, cheers. And it's a subtle difference, but it's an incredibly important difference.
Mm-hmm. I find I think when I try to, because I find subjects like immigration, human beings in general, I try to, and I know you can't do that, I can do that.
Yeah.
But I remove political, where you try to stand politically completely from that, because it's more of I find it's a human being thing. It's a moral thing. It's it has nothing, for me, it has nothing to do with politics. For you, I know it does not, right? Political parties are, policy, so on and so forth, how things go through DC, and it's just a very weird system, right? And it's sad because I don't something that has to do with a human being's well-being shouldn't really have to do with a system. It should just have to do with morality. But I don't envy kind of the journey that you're on, because it's definitely an uphill battle, because people are so deeply entrenched in their stance, because it could be something that they've lived with since before they were born.
Yep.
The day that they were born, they were just supposed to be Republican, or the day they were born, they were supposed to be a Democrat.
So, this is the thing. It's what we found is that we've created these opportunities, and this isn't done in any sort of a mercenary way or any way that's disrespectful. It is really done we really try to do this in a way that's authentic and really tries to understand and respect people's values. But oftentimes we run across and we engage men and women who have told us, I had no idea that you were out there and you thought about and you could help me think about immigration in a different way. Because oftentimes, folks are they feel very, very alone because they're in these in-groups where, the norm is to be very, very anti-immigrant. And they want to break with that norm.
And if you say opposite, you were ostracized.
Totally ostracized.
You were ostracized,
You're shamed.
and you're just, and it's crazy to me. Just because you have a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
The thing is that people don't have the mental bandwidth anymore to have that conversation.
So what happens for that person who wants to go someplace else, if they go someplace else and they say, I want to think about this differently, they get ostracized by their friends and family, and then they get shamed by the left, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're, this is not worth it.
Right? Yeah.
But so from our perspective, we're this is completely worth it, because if you lend your voice and become a part of and start to find a different community, we're not asking you to join the left. We're just asking you to become a part of a conversation that says, we as a country can chart a different path.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can create those moments, it's incredibly inspirational.
Yeah.
Because it just kind of gives you hope in humanity in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, hope is the biggest word, right?
Right.
It's if you can, maybe we align on 75% of the issues, but if I differ from you in 25%, and maybe I can help you along the way to maybe change your perspective. I don't want to change your opinion completely,
right,
but just so you can understand my viewpoint.
Right.
All that it is good old school conversation.
Exactly.
And people just don't have it anymore, because you have to dumb it down to 140 characters, right? Isn't that what they have on Twitter now? 140?
I can't remember the number.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Nick, producer, how many characters are you allowed on Twitter?
Is it still 140? I think it's more than 140.
280.
280?
280. They doubled it.
Wow.
280.
It's
Look at
a
that.
crazy world.
Now you're given 280 characters to like really get your opinion out there. Yeah. So, and then again, it's like it's not a conversation anymore because people again, and this is why I find the table of food to be so important.
Yeah.
People are breaking bread and having a conversation about like we could totally differ,
Yeah.
but we could still share a meal.
So have you seen? Have you heard about Patty Jiménez?
I have not.
So she's has a PBS show, and
I love PBS shows.
oh man,
I love them.
So she is fantastic. She's also based in DC, but she just did a documentary, a series of episodes where, I mean, her entire purpose as a chef is to take the viewer to Mexico.
Amazing.
And it's amazing. I mean, has great cookbooks and just really, really charismatic on the screen. But her most recent series of episodes is really just focused on the border region and what is happening along the U.S.-Mexico border, particularly in Texas. And she just tells these stories of, these communities that are divided by a border, but their histories had no border. And their food, therefore, has no border. And, how the food on one side of the border is similar to, what is cooked and eaten and enjoyed on the other side. And it's just it's a really, really special show on PBS these days. La Frontera.
La Frontera. This is totally off subject, but it just, what your story just took me to a place that I was fortunate enough to do a seminar at the Culinary Institute of America in California.
Yeah.
And
I just bought their cookbook.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Was it good?
It's a big ass book, man.
A lot of information.
A lot of information.
Yeah. And I did 2 different talks. And one of them I did with a very dear friend, Diego Oca, that's a chef here at Lamar. And then another one I did with Cristina Martinez, that's the chef from South Philly Barbacoa. She's an immigrant. She was on Chef's Table. She's got a beautiful story. And, I was like, I felt super like outmatched, right? Because she's got this, like, she's just like such an enamoring human.
Yeah.
Like she's just like so sweet and like so caring. And like the connection she has with food is like incredible. So just, again, going back to the point of like talking about immigrants. So I think I was like first, like I did my talk first. Right? Like they put small potatoes at the beginning and then they finish off with the big timers. So I was like, cool. So I'm going to sit in the audience, and I sat in the first row and I watched her do her thing. And they only like allotted us like 20 minutes of talk time. And she had the most beautiful presentation, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't even remember what it was that we were talking about in that one seminar, because I don't remember what I spoke about, because all I remember is what she did.
Yeah.
And she literally like did the old school way of making like masa for tortillas. And like the dish didn't even matter, but it's the way that she did it. I mean, it was like hundreds of years old. She was literally on her hands and knees making this masa, and it was like so romantic, and I felt so connected. Like I was literally in the front row almost crying.
Yeah.
It was incredible, right? And then, I remember the moderator was like, all right, so we're at 25 minutes, time has passed. I'm like, shut up, just let her do her thing. Like, who cares about fucking time? Just let her like do her thing. And I think about it, like, if I didn't have that human being in my life at that one moment, like, I wouldn't have understood or felt so connected to something that I did not know it was made that way, or like how they felt about a thing. And to me, that's why I love different cultures so much, because you learn so much, right? And you learn, like, it's so connected.
So how did you get into cooking?
Like
I know. Whose podcast is this?
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. My grandfather and my grandmother are cooks, and my grandfather had a bakery in Cuba, and I was never like the one that was like the stories of like, I was at my grandparents' like, knee, like asking them to cook. Like I wasn't that, but I would watch.
Yeah.
And I loved how much they loved to feed their family. And that thing to me, like that experience of being able to provide a table of people an opportunity to connect with each other, and you connect with them through food, I loved it. So I actually went to college. I played college football, and I went to college, and I had I went to school for a thing, but it really didn't matter because it just, I got into my first restaurant and I never left.
Yeah.
It was just the thing about, they say when you walk into a space that you feel like it's just supposed to be for you. Yeah. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like the connection I had of the memory of my grandparents cooking and what that did for me and what that did for our family, and how they were the ones that connected all of us, and they connected all of us obviously through who they are and through their food.
Yeah.
Is something that I'll never forget. And I hope, like, that's something that I can do for, the public on a daily basis. Obviously, it's very different when it becomes a business, but, that's really why I got into it. And I love it. Like, I feel very connected to, very passionate, romantic, and connected to it, you know? And those things, to me, it's like the human aspect of all of that too, like learning so much about people in the process, and so many different types of people, even from when I was like, I don't know, I got my first restaurant job at 19, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm a Cuban American kid living in Virginia in a mom and pop place, making Brunswick stew, which I had no idea what that was, and biscuits with apple butter, which I had no idea what that was either. When someone told me barbecue, I thought we were just making burgers. Like I had no clue. Uh-huh. But I learned so much, and that I find that like exciting every day.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been a day, and obviously, you go through that like mental, like mundane, like this is what I do. And then you have that moment, it just snaps and it's like, fuck, that's why I love this.
Yeah.
And that's really, I got into cooking in a very like laissez-faire way. I'm a huge competitor too. So like it's in me to like want to be the best or try to be the best.
Well, you're doing pretty good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're very good, I should say.
Yeah. Still got a long way to go, but it's like, it's really the people, and I say this to my staff all the time, the people make the place.
Yeah. And
they come from everywhere. So as a leader, I find that probably the most intriguing part.
So do you feel like, and I've always wanted to ask Christian this, but do you feel like that's different with your generation of restaurant leaders and chefs as opposed to the previous generation?
Oh man, so different.
Yeah.
Man, I came up under some really tough guys.
Yeah.
Really, really tough people. I had eggs thrown at me. I had plates thrown at me. People burnt me with hot pans. Like, I went through like the old school time of like the time frame of change, but it was like the change was still happening.
Yeah.
So, and it's okay. I learned a ton there, and I learned a ton of what not to do.
Yeah.
But I really attribute a lot to, I think, the leadership aspect of why I hope I'm pretty good at my job through sports. I mean, team sports taught me a ton because, again, you have a ton of different walks of life from totally different backgrounds. And you're all like going for like a goal. You good? Yeah, of course. You're all going for like a goal, and that's really the most important thing. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are, how old you are. If your girlfriend dumped you yesterday, it doesn't matter.
You still got to make food.
That's right.
Yeah.
You still got to work for the team because the team is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Come on, Rafa, hurry up. So I think that's like the food thing is really why it sticks with me so much. So let me ask you, in your time, has there been a time for you, in the immigration world, it's been 20 years. Has there been like one point for you that like immigration and food really came together and was like, this was something that's really a story that should be told, and something that it's like, maybe it resonates with you till this day?
Yeah. Immigration and food. So many stories.
I'm sure.
So, I mean, there's all kind, and maybe something will come up that'll be a little more localized. But one of the people that I feel really fortunate to get to know is Jose Andres,
Yep.
And
if he doesn't want that credit on the book, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a big name, but
I like to think I got to know Jose just before he became super famous. And
sorry to cut you off, but Jose has. There's been like a few people in the food world that have changed perception of who we are and what we do, and Jose is one of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's an incredible human being. What he's done for the world, what he's done for the world of food, the food that he puts out on top of that, like, he is like definitely someone that a lot of people should look up to and be like, that's the mountain that I want to try to climb to try to get to a place.
So this was, I'll tell a story that was before World Central Kitchen, before he's now kind of the household name that he is. So this is probably 2013 or 14. And there's a push to get the House of Representatives to pass comprehensive immigration reform. And their SEIU and a number of other activist organizations, we were helping in the background, but just tangentially, they pitch a tent on the National Mall and they start a fast for families. And Eliseo Medina, who is just a revered organizer, who's cut his teeth as one of the first organizers with Cesar Chavez, with United Farm Workers. He's then with SEIU, and he's leading the fast. And this goes back to the days of Chavez. So I call up Jose and I say, Jose, these folks on the mall, they're fasting. They would be grateful for you to come by and just say hello. And he says, I'll do it. So we go down there and meet him on it was a cold kind of wintry night in this tent, and he just sits there with them and reads an essay that he had written that ended up getting published as an op-ed for the Washington Post. And I just remember I was sitting there kind of watching him talk to folks, and I'd seen him kind of in other community settings, and it was just like, okay, this is real. And kind of seeing that moment and then kind of watching him do everything that he's done since then. It's about food, and it's about making sure that people have food and are fed, but ultimately it's about people, and that people are cared for and respected and welcomed. And there's just so much that whether or not he would ever realize it, that I think we've all learned from him, and I know I have. And but it's everybody from Jose Andres, and then a non-food related story I would share is that back when I was in Boston, and this is 2007, there was an immigration raid about 60 miles south of Boston in New Bedford. And we had kind of the organization I was running at the time, we had helped kind of organize the response, and we set up a kind of an operations center in the church basement. And we lined up an NPR story to interview a young man whose wife had been detained and might be deported, and they had a young baby. And around noon that day, he gets a call from immigration enforcement. They're going to release his wife because of the baby. So he just runs out of the church, right? And we figure NPR is coming at 2 p.m. We're not going to see him. And he wasn't a community leader at the time. He was just a guy who worked in a factory, whose wife worked in a factory, and he was kind of making, they were trying to make things happen as undocumented, Guatemalan immigrants. And he comes back at 2 p.m. for the interview. And we said, why are you here? And he says, well, I've learned that this is my community, and I have to fight for my community. And this is why I said earlier that, I'm always very clear that who I am and who I'm not. Because the folks who are immigrants, the folks who are undocumented, who are putting their names and their voices out there, that just takes a level of courage that I'm never going to have to exhibit. And, those are the folks that are pinned against borders, hoping for protection, hoping for freedom. And those are the stories that I hope we're able to share with the country, and I hope I'm able to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes a certain type of person, to live almost within fear daily, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that they live their day-to-day life and try to live this grind of every day.
Yeah.
And essentially live in fear, and I in my line of work, I deal with it a ton. And it's, I think that the biggest difference was becoming just like a everyday chef than to becoming a business owner, than to becoming a business owner of multiple things. It's eye-opening, like the story of people and how they live with fear and how they're just trying to
I mean, how big is your company now? Is the company now?
We have 5 locations, growing to 8. We have 147 employees currently.
Yeah, that's a massive operation.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of lives.
It's a lot of human beings that, I think the hardest thing was growing to understand that you're responsible for so many people.
Yeah.
And you want them to be okay, and you want them to be successful, and they all come from different walks of life and very different struggles.
Right.
And the struggle could be immigration, the struggle could be different.
Right.
I've dealt with everything under the sun. So I couldn't imagine that, right? Because being from, I'm the son of 2 people that came here when they were fairly young. My mom was 14 and my dad was 17, I think. I was fortunate enough to be born here and to, that's why they came here. That's why my grandparents came here. That's why they fled the country that they love very, very much, to give us opportunity. And I think that for me, and so many people like me, that's why my work ethic is the way that it is, because I would never want to let them down, and I have a responsibility to them and to their name and to our culture and to so many things, and I just want to add to the landscape of what we do. But again, within that, you deal with so many different hardships of your employees and their story and their struggles and the dreams that they have too, and it's really, really interesting. And I think I learned so much just from listening to you for 80 minutes before we started recording this.
Thank you.
And it's such a factual outlook on things that I think so many people would benefit from listening to. I think that they need to, again, it's what we said a little while ago, which was your political party or where you stand or what you do or what you align yourself with. You need to remove yourself from that and just listen to facts about the longevity and the health of the country as a whole, right? And maybe accept that you were wrong, maybe accept that you said wrong things, maybe accept that maybe you don't want to change, and that's okay.
Right.
All those things are fine, but having that conversation is the first step to getting somewhere, I guess, and that's why I said it earlier, I don't envy your position, right? Because again, political standpoints they're tough. It's it's people really want to they want to sit there and they want to bear down, and it's this is who I am, this is where I'm from. They don't want to listen to any other outlook, and it's, I don't know. I think that I think everyone at all times should have be open to a conversation.
Well, I appreciate this, man. Thank you very, very much for the opportunity, and thank you.
So I think that we're good here. I think that this is probably one of the most intellectual conversations that we've ever had on Pancom Podcast, which I love. Producer,
David.
We're doing partner recommendations.
Oh, here we go. This is the
Man,
wind down.
Nick has been drinking, huh? Nick looks a little sauced up, everyone. I know you haven't talked into your ball tickler all day.
I know. We've retired the ball tickler for the time being.
I'm shocked by that. You've really just been playing nice with your...
has the ball tickler come up? Is Ali totally in the dark on the ball tickler?
He's in the dark, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm okay with that. I'm gonna be straight up. I am. You guys can keep that between yourselves.
Yeah.
It'll be on Nick's Wikipedia page.
There you go.
Yeah.
Are you going to write that for me?
No, probably not, but I'll do my best.
So this is the part of the show I haven't been listening to all this time, where we do our wind down.
Great. I just like to say that without any of your...
Was it better?
Oh, so much better. Without any of your involvement, we absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, did you solve all the world's problems?
Every single one.
I mean, Jose Andres is going to be on the show next week.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he's coming. He's coming in.
Oh, man.
He made a phone call for us. We're good.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it. So this is where we do our wind down. We start with our parting recommendations. This is where we go around the horn here and everybody recommends a thing that our listeners should do or watch or eat or read, as long as it's not yours, because we do shameless plugs after this.
Right. And it could be absolutely ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah.
It could be a candy you really like.
You want me to give my favorite example here?
Sure.
Joaquin Gonzalez.
No. This is too.
It's
this is
all the same podcast.
Yeah, no, I know this is too good of a podcast
Okay,
to
great.
add Joaquin's party recommendation. Absolutely not. And
Okay,
I
great.
love him, but we're not adding.
Okay, sure. We'll tell Ali about it later.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
But yeah, anything that people should eat or read or watch or whatever, we recommend that everything from TV shows to songs to YouTube videos to travel destinations, restaurants, whatever it might be.
I'm actually super ready for this.
Are you?
It's just coming in hot.
I know. I'm super ready. But Nick, you go first, right? Because you haven't done shit all night.
That is a good point.
Yeah, absolutely fucking nothing.
That is a good point. I'm going to recommend that if you are a dog owner,
Okay.
trim your dog's nails yourself.
Yeah.
I just started doing this.
Really? Game changer?
Oh, why am I paying anybody for this?
How's your dog feel about it?
He doesn't care about anything.
No, he does. He does care.
No,
about
I mean, he's fine. He's fine. You know, but it was not as intimidating an experience as I thought it would be. Maybe my dog has the temperament to make it easier, but I would recommend that if you have never given it a shot, give it a shot. If you're a dog owner, trim that guy's nails or that girl's nails or, you know, however your dog identifies. And get in there. Get in there and try to do it yourself. Save yourself a little money. Bathe your dog. Give your dog a shitty haircut. Save some money, you know?
Man, you can really tell he hasn't been involved the whole podcast. That's like what a party recommendation. What else you got, Nick?
What else do I got?
Please, please, just come on in. Wow.
I am going to recommend. I think I've recommended. I recommended this person's thing before, but I will recommend another thing of his. Last episode, I think I recommended a song called "Blasphemy" by Coleman Hughes, who is a columnist for. What are you shaking your head
You
about?
didn't? I don't think you did.
I did. You don't remember anything. And tomorrow you're not going to remember any of this.
That's also true.
Coleman Hughes made his name as a columnist for Quillette. He was a protege / mentee of Columbia University linguist John McWhorter. And he's got a song out, a rap song, called Blasphemy, that I recommended the last episode, that is shockingly good, considering all the background I just gave you that you would not associate with a rap song worth listening to. But he also has a podcast called Conversations with Coleman that is worth listening to. The last episode I heard, I wish I could remember the name of the guest, but it was about, I think the title of the episode was Parenting in the 21st Century. So it was all about like common misconceptions about parenting and child rearing and education and what you're feeding your kids and kind of like a lot of myth busting about parenting, which was pretty cool. So Conversations with Coleman. It's not always that kind of thing. His bread and butter is like conversations about race and especially being black in America. But he's an interesting guy. He's also a fellow with I forget what like libertarian-ish think tank.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's my thing. Is that enough things for you?
Oh, it's so many.
Great.
More than I needed. All right, your turn, sir.
My turn? Let's see. So I would recommend a movie. It's on Netflix, Harder They Fall.
Oh, okay.
It's with Idris Elba, Lakeith Stanfield. Oh dear, I'm blanking on. It's just fantastic. It's a black cowboy western.
Ooh.
Amazing soundtrack. It's kind of one of those soundtracks that I'll just kind of have on repeat. Just a great flick.
What was the name again?
Harder They Fall.
Harder They Fall.
Harder They Fall.
Okay. So I have a couple.
No, I knew you would.
So, I was at a dive bar the other day.
They're the best kind of bars.
Man, the best.
You want to name? Let's give our out of towner a recommendation for his next
Seven
trip.
Seas.
Uh-huh.
Seven Seas is my home bar. It is my dive bar.
A little crowd approval.
Yeah, attaboy. That's how you know what's up. And they didn't have food that day, so I was with a bunch of like classic car guys, and they were all
GMC guys or Bronco guys?
Cadillac. We're all Cadillac guys. And they all had too much to drink, and they were like, we really want food. And then one of my friends was like, order from this place. I said, all right, cool, I'll order. It's called No Manches Que Rico. Right? It's I believe it's on A Street in like something. I don't really remember. But the tacos were delicious.
Really?
After being delivered, which nothing through delivery is any good other than Domino's Pizza. It was, and my delivery was by
Domino's
Claudia.
Pizza, that's ads at dademag.com.
We will definitely take your ad money. The tacos were absolutely delicious, and we crushed them. And that's recommendation on food. On things to view, I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy fan, so I just finished watching The Witcher.
Oh yeah, what'd you think?
Yeah, I liked it.
Have you watched Station 11?
No.
Okay, can't ask what you think because you haven't seen it.
What is that on Netflix?
It's HBO.
Oh, I got that.
Yeah,
I
it's
got
solid.
that.
It's solid. But Witcher is good.
Witcher was good.
Yeah.
I'm like they said the next season's not going to come out for like another 2 years.
Oh.
Like, how do you stay into it after waiting 2 years for the next season?
They're just
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Like the bandwidth of humans nowadays is very small.
Yeah.
Me included, when it comes to like shows. I'm just saying. I also just finished watching the book of Boba Fett.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like love it, but it was. They made Mark Hamill look young again,
That's some science fiction. Right there.
is it ever? And they give him an acting credit on it, which I thought was shocking.
Huh.
Because it was like the young version of Skywalker, and I was like, So he looks young, and then he got the credit for it, but this is all CGI. I don't totally understand what's happening.
It's his likeness.
Sure. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
When they use my likeness on like underwear ads, I'm like,
Do they?
Yeah.
I mean,
I need the royalties.
you need the royalties
Yeah.
and the credits, and I haven't gotten to that level yet.
Right. If somebody's listening to this podcast till then, they're like, up to this point, they're like, really? This took a dive.
So I think those are my recommendations for the parting side, and then shameless plugs.
Shameless plug. So this is where you plug all your own stuff. Tell people where they can find you and all your things on the interwebs.
When are you
Meatspace.
when are you releasing this?
I'm gonna try to release it before the end of the week.
Oh, well, okay, so that's good. So we are doing a wonderful dinner with Michelin starred chef
right.
Ryan Rutino
And future Pancon podcast guest.
and future guest February 24th. We only have 12 seats left. I think the dinner is going to be a riot.
Ryan Rutino of
From Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
From Bresca.
Yeah, and Jaunt.
And Jaunt.
And I think the dinner is going to be a good time. Like I said, there's 12 seats left. We're also starting to do a bunch of like late night drink things at Chugs, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Just more of a reason to go there at nighttime and eat food and drink cocktails. Yeah, I think that's it.
Great.
And then all the things. Just follow all the stuff.
This is where we'll play All the Things by Sade.
Yep. All the things. I still got to recommend all my shit. I mean, we've done this 80 times already.
All the things.
All the things.
All the things.
Yeah, all the things.
All the things. All the things. All the things.
All the things. I have like a deep affection for Sade.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever see her in concert? I've seen her twice.
I have said, you've seen her twice?
I saw her I am that old.
What? I've actually said openly that I will drop whatever amount of money it takes so I can see her in concert.
I saw one of the best concerts was Sade. I think opening was Diggable Planets.
Oh man, I love Diggable Planets.
Yeah.
That's like not a very common.
I am that old.
Yeah, just like people would be like Diggable Planets and be like, who? I love Diggable Planets.
Yeah.
They are so good.
Yeah.
So underrated.
Totally.
Yeah. Wow. What year was that? Go ahead, tell the people.
Oh, that was probably like I was in college, probably like 96, 97.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
All right.
Ali, shameless plugs. Where can people find you, find your things, find...
So you can find the work at immigrationforum.org, and then my book, Crossing Borders: The Reconciliation of Nation of Immigrants. You can find at Ali Noorani, ALINOORANI.org. Book comes out on March 15th. I would really, really appreciate folks pre-ordering. And guys, I just got to say thank you. This was really just a lot of fun, and I just really appreciate all that you do. We completely enjoyed the meal. Really, really, really valued and grateful for the conversation. Just thank you.
Man, I am like honored. Man, I am so honored. It's really...
Are we doing a lightning round this episode?
Of course we are.
All right, so
we have to do a lightning round. I'm going to say thank you so much for being on the podcast before we go into our lightning round.
Yeah.
For some reason, people pay $1 every month just to listen to these dumb lightning rounds, but it's really
Hey,
fun
listen,
questions.
some people are getting mugs, okay?
People get mugs. Some people have several mugs.
Some people get coffee.
Oh, yeah?
Henry Gomez was the first one who wised up and after like mug number 5 switched to the coffee tier.
Somebody has 5 mugs?
He might have 4. I don't know. He's got a
4
bunch.
mugs?
He's got too many mugs.
Too many mugs. So, okay. We're done here? Lightning round?
So we'll do our shameless plugs. You can find all the Pangong Podcast things on social media at Pangong Podcast, PANCON Podcast, not
Panko.
Pumpkin Podcast, not Panko Podcast, not Pinko Podcast, or any of the other things that we've gotten in the past. It's Pangong Podcast. Also, dademag.com/Pangong Podcast. And you can give us all of your money, all of it, every penny, at patreon.com/DADEMAG, DADEMAG, for the people in the mug tier. You get mugs every 3 months.
Yep.
Or you can join the coffee tier and you get a bag of whole bean Abuela Mami coffee.
Wow.
Every month in the mail, sometimes every other month when I forget to ship it and send you 2 at a time. Which is the case now. There are people who are owed this month.
Pretty impressive operation you got here, man.
I mean, Petey the dog is really not pulling his weight around here.
The puppet master over here.
Oh,
Nick.
yeah.
He's just like absolutely crushing it. All right, we're going to sign off here so we can go to a lightning round before we get embarrassed anymore.
And now for the sign-off sound effect. Boop.